Secondly, tonight's lecture is on industry and company analysis. What I did over the weekend is I populated the lecture. Here's the PowerPoint I'm going to be doing today, and here are some additional PDFs that I use in my regular classes that will add color in meeting to what we're going to talk about tonight. So if you're, if it's interests you, read this, please, because that really adds color to it. Now, tonight after, and this is up to you, there is an assignment after each one of my lectures, right? And so before I get to this, so the school is blown away by how many all of you have shown up. They're still processing how many people are here. In fact, I should take a picture and send it to the dean, but I don't want to be self-promoting. But anyway, what somebody decided, which I jumped on, those of you who complete the final deliverable, which I'll get to in a second, the school is going to issue a modeling and valuation certificate that's certified by BU that you all can put on your resume, which will be tremendous for those of you who are interviewing. I completed the BU modeling and valuation program, and that's a great way for you to talk about the final analysis or paper on modeling and valuation that you are going to complete. So those of you who do the final deliverable, it's due in February, you upload it and it looks complete, you are going to get this certificate that you can put on your resume. I thought it was a great idea somebody came up with. So each week there is going to be a deliverable, right? And so you all are going to pick a publicly traded company. Each week, you're going to do a deliverable and upload it to the assignment section of the of Blackboard. Now, we can't grade 200 of these, right? I sure as hell don't have the time, and the leadership team has classes as well. The point of the uploads is to keep you on track. So this one is on industry analysis, which I'll get to, do Porter's 5 courses, understand its competitors, what is unique about this company and how does it compete to be unique, et cetera, et cetera. If you are somewhat diligent in following the deliverables, at the end of the semester or at the beginning of next year, all you've got to do is smush it together and you have your company analysis, which you can use to interview with and submit to get this, modeling and valuation certificate. Okay, so any questions on that? So I think it's it was a great idea by one of the, senior leadership at the school, and the school is figuring out a way how to do it, but it's going to happen. Okay. I would suggest those of you who have had me, this book, we're going to be talking about Michael Porter ad nauseum tonight. This is an amazing textbook. It's not even a textbook. It reads like a novel. So this book, you should carry with you, throughout the rest of your time at Questrom, whether you're a freshman or you're a senior. Understanding Michael Porter by Joe Magretta. It is an amazing book. And it's a great resource, not just for this, but for your other classes. So it's $17 or $18. Order on Amazon. It'll make doing company analysis much easier. All right, so tonight is on industry analysis. Why are we spending in my other classes, we spend 3 or 4 weeks on industry analysis and strategy. Why do we spend so much time on industry analysis and strategy? If you think, this class is on modeling, you're like, what the hell is that he's talking about modeling? Why are we talking about industry analysis and company strategy? Well, if you look at a model, it is a projection of the future. How can you possibly model the future, and what the company is going to do without having a deep understanding of the company, its fundamentals, its competitors, margin structure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? If you look at what a DCF is, it is basically a growing perpetuity. That growing perpetuity has some revenue assumptions, margin assumptions, right? You need to really understand your company deeply to have any confidence in terms of where margins are going to be. If you change your margin assumptions by 400 or 500 basis points, you're going to get a dramatically different answer. Really, securities analysis, modeling, and valuation, it's all about getting the inputs right, right? Getting the inputs right, anyone can do an Excel spreadsheet. It's not that complicated, right? Getting the inputs right is everything. And this is where the superb investors spend all their time on industry analysis. If 2 years ago, you would have figured out that NVIDIA, GPU, which was made for gaming, was going to translate itself to artificial intelligence, and that they're the only game in town, and their CUDA software differentiated them from everyone else, you are worth a fortune today, right? So people who invested in NVIDIA, right, they didn't spend the last, 4 hours on whether their cost of capital is 10 or 10.2%. Like, who gives a shit, right? You got to get their revenues right. If you get their revenues and the margins right, the cost of capital is irrelevant to the situation. So let us hear I wish I had met him, Warren Buffett. We're going to have 2 quick Buffett videos, and then I'm going to jump in and do the PowerPoint.
What are the fundamental rules of economics you use to make money for Berkshire?
The most important thing you can, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find a business with a wide and long-lasting moat around it, surrounded and with protecting a terrific economic castle with an honest lord in charge of the castle. And in essence, that's what business is all about. I mean, you may want to be the lord of the castle yourself, in which case you don't worry about that last factor. But what we're trying to find is a business that, for one reason or another, it can be because it's a low-cost producer in some area. It can be because it has a natural franchise service capability. It can be because of its position in the consumer's mind. It can be because of the technological advantage. Any kind of reason at all that it has this moat around it. And then what we have to decide is all moats are subject to attack in a capitalistic system. So everybody is going to try, if you've got a big castle in there, people are going to be trying to figure out how to get to it. And what we have to decide, and most moats aren't worth a damn in capitalism. I mean, that's the nature of it. And it's a constructive thing that that's the case. But we are trying to figure out why is that castle still standing? And what's going to keep it standing or cause it not to be standing 5, 10, 20 years from now? What are the key factors? And how permanent are they? How much do they depend on the genius of the lord in the castle? And then if we feel good about the moat, then we try to figure out whether the lord is going to try and take it all for himself, whether he's likely to do something stupid with the proceeds, etc. But that's the way we look at businesses.
Yeah, I've never really read Porter, although I've read enough about him to know that we think alike in a general way. So I can't refer you to specific books or anything, but my guess is that what he writes would be very useful for an investor to read. I just see him referred to in some commentary, but I think he talks about durable or sustainable competitive advantage as being the core of any business. And I can tell you that is exactly the way we think. I mean, that in the end, if you were evaluating a business year to year, the number one question you want to ask yourself is whether the competitive advantage has been made stronger and more durable before it, and that's more important than the P&L for a given year. So I would suggest that you read anything that you find that's helpful, or actually the best way to do it is study the people that have achieved that and ask yourself how they did it and why they did it. I mean, why is it that in razor blades, everybody grows up in business school hearing that as a great example of a product that's very profitable, and why, with it obvious that there's going to be no reduction in demand in the next 100 years for the product, why are there no new entrants into the field? What is it that gives you that moat around the razor blade business. Normally, if you got a profitable business, a dozen people want to go into it. You've got a fresh shop here in town, and it looks like it's doing well. A couple other people want to open up a shop next door to it. And here's a worldwide business. Nothing can go wrong with the demand to speak of, and yet people don't go into it. So we like to ask ourselves questions like that. We like to ask ourselves, why was State Farm successful, against people that had incredible agency plants and lots of capital, and here's some farmer out in Bloomington, Illinois, named George Maherl, who's in his 40s, sets up a company that defies capitalistic imperatives. I mean, it has no stock, it has no stock options, it has no big rewards. It's kind of half socialistic, and all it does is take 25% of the market, away from all of these companies that have all these characteristics. We believe you should study things like that. We think you should study things like Mrs. B out in the Nebraska Furniture Mart, who takes $500 and turns it, over time into the largest home furnishing store in the world. There has to be some lessons and things like that. What gives you that kind of a result and that kind of competitive advantage over time? And that is the key to investing. I mean, if you can spot that, particularly if you can spot it when others don't spot it so well, you're on the, you will do very well. And we focus on that. Shall I? Yeah.
And I guess the last point before I thought I had uploaded an example of a great, let me just see here. Oh, no, this is the wrong, here we go. There is an example, one of my students last year, let me just show you. If you're looking for a guide how to do this, this is from one of my stud students last year. He did Hershey. This was his industry analysis. So you can kind of see how it's organized. So I'm not going to go through it, but I mean, it's an amazing student who did this. You can kind of see the importance of, he took 14 pages, but you can probably do this in 5 or 6. But when you add graphics, et cetera, but this is really how it should be structured if you're looking at a guide to do it for your company, and it's under today's lecture. So Warren Buffett, right? The key to investing is not assessing how much an industry is going to affect society or how much it will grow, but rather determining the competitive advantage of any given company, and above all, the durability of that advantage. Competitive advantage refers to what makes this company unique. So if you have a 30% margin, you want to have confidence that that 30% margin isn't going to go to 10% over time, right? What about that company allows it to generate a 30% margin? NVIDIA, I think, has a 60 or 65% operating margin. And like an 80%, it's a chip manufacturer. What about NVIDIA allows them to generate a margin that is that high, right? And I'm not a chip expert, but a combination of a great chip design and software that basically can get a maximum power out of that chip. AMD, a competitor to NVIDIA, their chip is probably as good, but their software is terrible. So you pay all this money for the chip, and it operates at half a capacity. So this is, again, what makes NVIDIA unique. If you were going to model NVIDIA and value NVIDIA, you would really want the key decision, again, not is whether your cost of capital is 9.8 versus 9.6, is what are margins going to be 8 years from now, right? That's the key thing. Everything else is irrelevant. What are margins in the future? Is it going to be, is there, as Buffett said, right, is that's an economic castle everyone wants to raid and keep for themselves, right? But is there a moat around that economic castle? Others can't copy what they are doing. That's going to prevent people from coming in. So if you're doing a DCF or a terminal multiple of cash flow, you can have confidence in using a 60% margin, right? This refers to what does the company do that protects the economic castle. The wider and deeper the moat, the less likely somebody's going to come in and try to take it for themselves, right? The products or services that have wide sustainable moats around them are the ones that deliver rewards to investors, right? Can stand the test of time. Why does Buffett hate technology? He can't figure out the competitive advantage and how sustainable it is. So he's attracted to businesses where he understands the competitive advantage and he's confident it can stand the test of time. And if you think, putting aside whether you're a long-term investor, when you would do a DCF, that terminal value is standing the test of time, right? And so Fitbit, right back in 2015-16, came public. It was this first product that actually gave you your, fitness data, how far you walked, your heart rate, the intensity of exercise, and the stock went parabolic. But Fitbit had a product advantage, which means it was easy to copy. There was something unique about what Fitbit did. And then Apple Watch and all these other competitors came out 2 years later, and there was no moat around this product, and it got quickly eroded away. Big question facing Tesla today: do they have a competitive advantage or do they have a product advantage? Now, if you look at how Tesla operates as a company, right, there's a lot of things that they do that make it hard for people to copy them or compete against them, right? They have, charging stations as an example, right, that work. So that charging stations, this is something that they do that amplifies their competitive advantage. Just, they have, data which informs, their, algorithm that at some point in time may allow the car to drive without human intervention. So back in 2018, 17, 18, I don't remember when, Apple only had one size phone, and Samsung and others came out with these big phones. And so Samsung's advertising for a year was like big is better, and they took market share from Apple. Well, Apple, Tim Cook is not stupid. A year later, they came out with 2 or 3 different size phones that were big, and whatever product advantage that Samsung had quickly was competed away, right? So Apple, right, if you look at a phone, the iPhone today, it's expensive. This is deliberate on the part of Apple, right? They segment only the high end of the market, right? And so, they do not compete at the low end. They target the high end. As a result, even though they only have 20% market share of the smartphone industry, they essentially capture all the economic profit. And this is what we care about as investors or people in the finance industry, right? We care about capturing economic value. I mean, that's why, that's why we're here. They can capture the economic value because they have a strong competitive advantage that others cannot copy. So how enduring is a competitive advantage, right? What is the impact on a company's and industry's margins to potential change? Is the industry susceptible to disruptive technologies? This is what finance is all about. In fact, I would argue it's teaching malpractice to teach a class on modeling and valuation with not at least spending 1 or 2 classes on industry analysis or company analysis. How can you possibly teach a class on this without at least, having some thought behind the numbers? So the key to competitive success for a business and nonprofits, right, is does the company create unique value? And we define unique value as, unique value to the customers, right? If you are creating unique value to the customers and you're a for-profit company, chances are you're going to be creating a lot of unique value for your shareholders, right? It is a reinforcing loop, right? Apple creates huge unique value to all of you because this is the phone that you own. You are willing to spend $1,000 on it, right? And so because they're creating unique value for you, in essence, you're starting to create, because of loyalty, you're willing to pay a high price, they generate high margins. This is how it trickles down to shareholders, right? Creating value, not beating rivals, is really the heart of competition. What you want to do is avoid industries or companies where they're competing to be the best, right? This leads to a destructive zero-sum competition that no one wins, right? Competition should be focused on meeting needs, right, rather than demolishing rivals. Meeting needs, or figuring out how you meet needs, is really the key to creating value. Which needs is this product or service that I'm thinking of launching, is it going to be? We want to avoid industries or companies where they compete to be the best. And so when you compete to be the best, we have the same strategy. This price competition comes over time, right? Choice can be sacrificed, value destroyed. There's a service cutback, offset deteriorating margins. Chronically poor profitability underlies investment in the future, and everyone loses, the customers and companies that serve them. So the classic one that I use in all my classes is the airline industry, right? You don't really care who the airline is. You care, I'm going from Boston to Chicago, what is the cheapest fare, right? This is a classic industry of competing to be the best, not competing to be unique. It is a commodity service. So what has happened over time as there's price wars. You cut back on the service. As opposed to 8 flights to Chicago today, there's only 4, right? The seats are closer together, right? There's no longer food served. You have to pay for baggage. This is an example of an industry where choice is sacrificed and value is destroyed. The opposite end of the spectrum is Google, right? Google earns monopoly-like returns in search. Why is Google still to this day generating huge value for their shareholders? They have a 90% market share in search. Some, and we would argue that it's a monopoly. In fact, the U.S. government, I believe, is suing them, because they're a monopolist. But the fact is that they create huge value for all of us, for their advertisers and for the users, and this is why the company has done well. And because the margins on search are so high, what do they do with those excess margins? They reinvest them back into the business, make the product and service even better, and come up with new products like Google Maps, right? Google Maps is a product of very high margins, right? So this constant reinvestment allows them to maintain their lead, and all of us, benefit. The real point of competition is not to beat your rivals, it's to earn profits, right? This is what it's all about. We want to avoid being the best. We want to be the best and avoid being, and we want to be unique and avoid being the best. Be unique, earn high returns, focus on profits, meet the diverse needs of target customers, and compete by innovation. So Michael Porter came up with this, again, the book does a great job, the Joe McGreta book, on Porter's 5 forces. And really, these 5 forces shape the industry structure. And what we do by looking at this, the 5 forces and analyzing it, is to immediately determine how the industry works, how a creation shares value, and explains the industry's profitability. So this is the classic, and those of you who are seniors and taking the strategy course are probably currently taking this, right? This is every industry, we examine Porter's 5 forces. And, bargaining power of buyers, bargaining power of suppliers, substitutes, threat of new entrants, and rivalry amongst existing competitors. Every day, what is going on here is that everyone is fighting for who's going to make all the money, right? And so by analyzing this, we can determine who is creating the most value, and chances are those companies that are creating the most value are the ones who are actually capturing it in terms of higher margins and higher shareholder returns, right? It really explains the industry's average prices and costs, and therefore the average industry profitability you're trying to beat. And it's really understanding the dynamics of competition, and who is this fight for profits really determines Porter's 5 forces, right? Business competition is the struggle for profits, the tug of war over who gets to capture the value an industry creates. This is what it's all about. If you're not creating that much value, you're barely covering your costs, right? This is the airline industry. So the first force is the power of buyers, right? How much buyer power is there out there, right? If we have powerful buyers, right? Buyers have a lot of the power. They can force down the price of the good or make the company selling the good or service enrich it with more features. So I used to cover the casino industry in the 90s, and it used to be the cost of building and constructing a casino in Vegas was 300 or 400 million, generated massive returns. But as competition heated up, that $300 or $400 million casino became $2 billion, right? This was reflected increased competition for the gamer who came to Vegas. Great for the buyers, not so great for the casino companies, right? So we try to assess buyer power, right? Channels to which products are delivered can be, as important as the end users, right? How price sensitive is the, buyer? And importantly, and really critical, is what are the switching costs associated with the buyers, right? Is there a high cost to switch from product A to product B? If the switching costs are high, chances are you aren't going to switch, right? So companies spend a lot of time trying to raise switching costs, and probably the best example is Apple, right? If you look at your iPhone, iCloud, right? All of your data is stored in the iCloud, right? Not only do they raise switching, they actually make money on charging you, $4 or $5 a month to have the iCloud. It intentionally does not work with Android. So if you were thinking of getting an Android phone, that switching cost is prohibitive. You do not want to lose all your data. You will pay anything to stick with Apple. Let us think about the ride-hailing industry. Are there switching costs between using Uber and Lyft? Probably not, right? You're going to focus to some extent on the price. So here, in the ride-hailing industry, switching costs are pretty low, and so this would say buyers have a lot of power. Similarly, supplier power, right? Powerful suppliers, they lower industry profitability. They are trying to capture more of the value for themselves. And in my class today, in my securities analysis class, we talked about Intel and the PC industry. Well, if we look at the PC industry and we are looking at Porter's 5 forces, right? We look at, the making of a PC is, there's really no value add. They all work the same, right? They all have the same processing power. They all have an Intel chip in them. This is the non-Apple PC, right? The Hewlett-Packard, Lenovo, et cetera, right? They all basically do the same thing. They all have the same Intel chip in them. They all have the same Microsoft operating system in them. So this industry, they compete on price, right? So they don't compete to be unique. They compete, to be the best, means who can charge the lowest price. Who captures all the value? It's the suppliers, right? The suppliers are the one that create all the value. That Intel chipset and that Microsoft operating system really is what drives all the unique value they capture. Well, that's really helpful when we're analyzing the PC industry itself. So if you were looking at owning Hewlett-Packard or Lenovo or one of these, PC manufacturers, you're going to quickly say, this is a terrible business, I'm not interested. So again, we look at switching costs, right? When we're looking at assessing power of buyers and suppliers. Why is it today, despite Wintel, right, a Microsoft operating system, why is it today, if you were to walk in the JP Morgan trading desk or a large company, why is it that Microsoft, they dominate the enterprise? It's because businesses, they are so embedded with Microsoft, the switching costs are gargantuan, right? You could never leave the Microsoft on the enterprise because it would cost billions and billions of dollars. So as a result, Microsoft has a monopoly in the enterprise. Substitutes put a cap on industry profitability. They do not come from direct rivals. They can come from unexpected places. Sometimes they're very hard to anticipate. We're going to look at unit economics. And again, switching costs play an important role in substitution. If we look at, again, the ride-hailing industry, at some point, right, if you want to go from point A to point B, you're going to call an Uber, right? Well, today I had to go pick up a pair of pants downtown Boston. It was $30 for me to go from Questrom to downtown Boston. I was like, forget it. It's $4 for me to take, the T. I took the T, right? Taking the T is a substitute for taking an Uber. Now, if the Uber was $5 or $6, I would have done that all day long. But so again, this is a substitute, right? Walking, taking the T. These are substitutes for the ride-hailing industry. It caps. Uber cannot charge you an infinite amount of money because there are alternative forms of transportation. But importantly, taking a cab is not a substitute. That is a rival. So it's really it's something that is not a direct rival. Really, the big boy is barriers to entry, right? What are the barriers to entry that make it hard for new entrants to come into the market? And this is where a lot of time and effort is spent on analysts, both in venture capital, private equity, and public investing, right? Entry barriers exist to protect an industry from newcomers who would add new capacity and seek to gain market share, right? This is a key to a company industry protective. This is the moat, the barriers to entry. If you were to leave BU today, raise a bunch of money to start a social media company, what's the chance anyone's going to give you any money? Not a chance in hell, right? Meta's got 3.2 billion users, so the users, right, that are out there, right, the network effects of users make it impossible for people to come in and, to compete against, in the social media, industry. If you were to say, hey, I'm going to start a new ride-hailing business, right? The barriers to entry are the network of drivers, right? The app, well, less so the app, but really it's that network of drivers that really makes it hard for somebody to come in. Because the drivers are driven by pure economics. They know if they, work for Uber, that they are going to make more money working for Uber than the startup. Or if you're willing to give them whatever, $100 an hour or $200 an hour, that's great, to replace their, but you are going to lose a lot of money quickly. So really, they can come in the form of brand name, shelf space, distribution. They come from all these different areas. As Buffett said, the key to investing is understanding how durable is that. What is that source of competitive advantage? Apple, you could argue, it's just the installed base of apps out there and of phones that basically becomes a reinforcing mechanism. And rivalry is the last force, right? If rivalry is intense, you're going to compete away all the value that is created, right? So price competition, we want to avoid this at all possible. It's the most damaging form of rivalry. Today, in the ride-hailing industry, we went from 4 or 5 competitors down to 2, Uber and Lyft, right? So there's 2 companies that are left in it. If you actually were to analyze the industry, Uber's already won. They have much higher market share. Yes, Lyft exists, but if we really look underneath and pull the covers back, they actually charge a much higher price because the car is going to get there faster. They have a better network of drivers, right? You are willing to pay for that convenience. But this is really the last force that we want to really analyze. Other businesses, rivalry isn't as intense. In the smartphone industry, right, who does Apple really compete with? Not that many other people, right? They have managed to create a moat around their business, which is why their margins are so high. Strategy can be viewed as building defenses against the competitive forces or finding a position in the industry where the forces are the weakest. And if you were, in the venture capital world, this is what you try to do. You try to find a position where there's, the forces are the weakest, where you can carve out a niche for yourself and, start a business. So again, industry structure is dynamic, not static. If you were to look at the securities and the business of investing, actually all, venture capital, private equity, public investing, the market has become ruthlessly efficient. When I started at Fidelity, no one called companies. Right? It was like an open plane. It was an open field. We were going to outperform every year. Today, there are industries. Today at Fidelity, there's probably 6 analysts who cover the biotech industry alone, and they're all PhD MDs. When I first started, we had a woman who did all of biotech, and she had her MBA from Harvard. And so the industry has become extremely concentrated and very, very industry specific. People spend all day trying to figuring out industry structure, right? Just think about NVIDIA and the different views out there, whether they do have a competitive advantage or they don't have a competitive advantage, right? People look, when they report their quarter, what happened to margins? What happened to revenue growth, right? This is informing their model of, about their future. If you follow NVIDIA, the chip industry, you are talking to as many companies as you can to see, is somebody coming up with a product that actually, a chipset with the software that can effectively compete, right? The better investors spend most of their time assessing industry structure and looking for change. Again, this is why specialization has really come down so much. If you want to make money, you need to be early. So again, the market is ruthlessly efficient. Spending your time on your Excel spreadsheet on cost of capital, this is not how you make money. It's by predicting the future better than the next person. So here we have two companies, Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks, right? They both serve the coffee market, but yet they both earn monopoly-like returns. Well, how can that be? Well, even though they both serve the market, Starbucks serves the high end, and there's a lot of things that Starbucks does that allows them to serve the high end successfully. And Dunkin' Donuts has carved them out, in the low to middle end, right? People who go to Dunkin' Donuts are not going to go to Starbucks, and people who go to Starbucks are not going to go to Dunkin' Donuts. They're two entirely different markets, right? Competitive advantage is about not beating your rivals, is creating superior value. Dunkin' Donuts earns huge returns serving this demographic that they've identified, right? The cost of a Dunkin' Donuts is probably $2. The cost of this is $4, right? You are willing to pay $4 for this cup of coffee for many different reasons. The beans, the atmosphere of the stores, the custom-made nature of the drinks, the logo, the brand prestige it brings in, right? When you go to a Dunkin' Donuts store, they're focused on two things, speed and convenience, right? You're in and you're out. In fact, you don't want to spend any time in there because it's kind of gross. Starbucks, you like spending time in there. It's a pleasurable setting. It smells good. It smells like coffee, right? Competitive advantage is all about superior performance. So in my class in valuation that I'm teaching this semester, we just did a case study on DoorDash, and one of the questions was, does DoorDash have a sustainable competitive advantage? I would say half the class said no, and half the class said yes, and it's hard, right? Because the company has huge market share and is doing really well versus its competitors, but yet its margin structure is low, which is which would suggest that they really, aren't providing value, but they are great about superior performance, right? And so they are outperforming everyone else, which is allowing them to generate such high market share gains. The way we measure, and we'll get to this in a couple of lectures, the way we measure competitive advantage is return on invested capital. And this is where we differ from the strategy folks. I mean, I love the strategy department, could be one of the best departments in the school, but they don't, as much as I beat them up, they talk about strategy, but they don't measure how successful the strategy is. This is how we measure strategy, the company's return on invested capital. So Apple, it's always held up there as this company with an amazing strategy. Well, Apple's return on invested capital is 200%. It is gigantic, which is why it is, one of the largest market share company, largest market caps out there. So there's really two ways to create, competitive advantage or value. First is creating more buyer value, right? Mechanism that makes it possible for a higher price relative to the rival offerings. You can command a higher price relative to the cost of that good, producing that good or service. Apple, right, classic, right? They earn very high gross margins. They can charge a very high price relative to the cost to produce the phone because of everything, that they do that causes you to buy the iPhone. So and most companies do this way, right? They tend to generate very high gross margins. Other companies, though, and Southwest, this has changed, but I'm not going to get into this. Southwest used to, even though they are in a brutally competitive business, the airline industry, how they competed on the value chain side, how their type of planes they had, their route structure, how they loaded and unloaded the planes was very unique. And as a result, their margins were 4 times the next airline. So they did it on the cost side. It's very hard to do it on the cost side. It is much easier to do it on the product side, right? Strategy choices aim to shift relative price or relative cost in a company's favor, right? So, boy, I'm flying through this because I don't ask anyone to, and we can summarize at the end. The value proposition is the element of strategy that looks outward at customers. It's demand side of the business. The value chain focuses internally on operations. How do we deliver this value proposition? Strategy brings both together. They must be fundamentally integrative, meaning the value chain and the value proposition completely support one another. If you can find a company where the two are completely supported, you're going to find a home run stock, right? So Google, right? Amazing value proposition. We are going to deliver you search, quickly. That's relevant, and the advertisers are actually, willing to pay for it. Huge value to users, huge value to the advertisers, right? Immense value creation, but their value chain is completely focused on that value proposition, right? This is why the company has been so successful. Hire the best coders, right? Only be focused on search. Don't don't be confused by other things. Focus on the speed of search, right? Have huge server farms that support what's actually going on. Apple, right? Apple's value proposition, what is Apple's value proposition? What does that mean to you? How would you summarize their value proposition? A premium, product that's, beautifully designed, easy to use, that, allows me to connect with my friends and across devices, right? This is really how the company is organized, right? I would say that is their value, and charges a premium price, right? Their value chain really reflects how that company is organized. So Apple, if you look at how they're organized internally, anything that does not involve touching the customer, they outsource. So all of the manufacturing, people don't really care who makes their phone. They outsource that to Foxconn in China. So if we look at Apple as a company, they are focused on the design of the phone, the hardware design, and the software that supports it, right? So Apple, their really huge success has been on getting the phone and all of their products. They are relentless in design and making sure the software and the hardware are seamless and work, perfectly together, right? The Android phone, the Google phone, they don't really care. They're outsourced. They actually give the Android software for free. It's not a focus of theirs. Steve Jobs would roll over in his grave if he ever allowed Apple to basically sell iOS or to let others design. It's who they are as a company. Again, the software and the hardware integration. And another part of value chain value proposition, with respect to Apple, is they sell a lot of their products through the iPhone store, right? Again, through the Apple store. Again, why do they do this? Well, they want to control the customer experience. This is an integral part of their value chain. They would never dream of letting an outsider sell, their products. Their employees know the product and are college graduates and are great at selling it. So the value proposition reflects the choices about the particular kind of value the company will offer, which customers are you going to serve, which needs are you going to meet, what relative price will provide acceptable value for the customers and an acceptable profitability for the company. How is the value proposition different than your customers? Well, different than your competitors. So using Starbucks as an example, right? They charge a premium price for this product, for coffee, right? The beans are expensive beans. It comes in a beautiful cup, right? It's customized, right? It's to the point where it's causing them issues with the customization process. But the company benefits from the customization process, right? So the value proposition is a drink that tastes great, that's ubiquitous across their platform, right? And that's custom made for you in an environment that is friendly and supportive. The value chain is the sequence of activities your company performs to design, produce, sell, deliver, and support its products, called the value chain. So if we were to look at Starbucks, right, their value chain is unique, right? They only source the best beans, right, in the world, right? They roast all of the beans themselves. They would never let anyone else do that to them. They pay baristas a fair amount of money to customize, the drinks for you, right? And as a result, they can charge a premium price. So if we look at, again, a company that has created tremendous value over time, the value chain and the value proposition are completely supportive of one another. And I guess the last slide, and man, did I fly through this, is this relationship between market share and margins, right? So the more market share you gain, the higher your margins are going to be, right? If you step back and think, this actually makes a lot of sense. As you get to be bigger and bigger and bigger, right? You're generating more units, right? Your factories or your cost of production is going down. Most companies, when this is happening, what do? They reinvest it back into the product, R&D, right? Adding additional features, right? And as they do that, it becomes this self-reinforcing flywheel. The product gets better, they widen their lead versus their competition, and they gain more and more market share, lowers their cost position. Maybe now that the product is that much better, they can charge a premium price, and their margins go up, commensurate. And I guess the last point that I'm going to make about this whole thing is, it used to be, and when I was at Fidelity, I mean, we were all cheap bastards in the 90s. We hated to pay up for the number one or number two market share person. We always bought the number three or number four market share person at a quote unquote discount. And our thought was, what actually worked, is that even though we could buy the number three or number four market share person, and even though our hope was we're not going to make up the entire valuation differential, but if we can make up half of it, we're going to make a lot of money. And that's kind of how we invested, and it actually works. Today, and especially in technology, these platform type businesses, right? Netflix or Spotify, right? Uber, right? If you buy the number two or number three, you're going to lose all your money. So in today's market, because of the network effects, et cetera, that come with the network effects, it has a way of quickly multiplying and cascading. So the number one person basically has all the market share, and there's no number two or number three. And if you invest in number two or number three, you're going to lose all your money. Why in search does Google have a 90% market share? They have no competition, right? Uber is the same thing. Uber has dramatically outperformed Lyft for all these different reasons. I actually will come pretty close to coming in on time. So why do we care about industry structure and valuation, right? How does this is a class on modeling and valuation. Market share concentration, the more market share concentration is tend to be the better from a valuation perspective. If there's 8 or 9 people slugging it out for market share, that's typically that's a zero-sum game, right? The number of competitors and the extent of consolidation. So again, and I did this case study in DoorDash 6 years ago. There were 8 or 9 competitors in the food delivery service industry, right? Everyone was trying to kill each other, and it was profitless prosperity. Today, we really have 2 competitors in the U.S. We have DoorDash and we have Uber Eats. So from a valuation perspective, you feel much better about investing in DoorDash because the industry is already consolidated, right? Are there barriers to entry? All right, again, critical when we're assessing valuation. What are the barriers to entry? Again, if you were going to start a food service delivery industry and you're out to raise money, everyone's going to slam the door, right? Those barriers to entry today are gigantic. You need the list of restaurants. You need the dashers, the people who are delivering the food. They are not going to go sign up and work for you. Why is a restaurant going to allow you to add them to your menu of offerings if they already have DoorDash? What value are you bringing to them? So the barriers to entry are gigantic today, right? Threat of regulation. Can this industry be regulated, right? And we're starting to see this with Google, but threat of regulation. How cyclical is the industry, right? The higher the cyclicality, probably the greater the variation in revenues and profitability, the less you are willing to pay for that company from a valuation perspective. So you want to understand when you're modeling the company, how variable, how sensitive is this company to economic changes. And finally and importantly, is this a capital intensive business, right? The less capital intensive the business, the more cash goes into shareholder pockets, and the higher the valuation, is going to be afforded. That was super fast, I admit it. Any questions? Again, I would use, if you have time, buy the Magretta book on industry structure, and as a way of staying ahead of the game, put together, even if it's just an outline, that industry structure and analysis assignment that I posted. It's under the assignment section. Before you go, hold on. Don't go anywhere. So under the assignment section of the Blackboard page, you can see the assignment for industry analysis. Try to have it uploaded by next week. It's not like we're going to grade them, but you can see there's a lot of stuff due. If you complete this by the end of the semester, all the final project is smushing it all together, right? So if you stay on top of it, you're not going to spend your winter break trying to keep up. Okay, see you in 2 weeks.